You're listening to Tabletop Genesis, a podcast by Genesis fans for Genesis fans. Talk about going back in time now to Spectral Mornings. So you had just kind of put together your band, you did your first tour, and and so then it was all right, let's jump into the studio. What was your thought processes going into this the third album at this point?
Well, a couple of things. Putting together a band that didn't play a single thing on either Voyage of the Acolyte or Please Don't Touch, apart from my brother, everyone else was new.
Right.
And so Brother John, we were working closely together at that time. I had a new band. I halfway through doing Please Don't Touch, I'd caught colitis, ulcerative colitis, and it put me in hospital halfway through that album. Luckily, I was as fighting fit as possible. There were a couple of things that were really written around the rehearsal room or around the rehearsal room period that we were already playing live. That was Clocks, and there's one other. I'm trying to remember which one. Spectral Mornings itself. Yes, actually, you're quite right. You know it better than I'm recalling it. And so those two pieces were there. The other pieces fell quite quickly into place. The biggie was Every Day.
Right.
Again, it really grew up around the band and the band capabilities. 3-part harmonies.
Yeah.
Which gave us a vocal sound for the first time. Let me see. And then there was Virgin and the Gypsy, which I'm still fond of because it's lyrical and folky, and gave John a chance to play some wonderful flute. We had two separate flute takes playing back at the same time. And that was his suggestion. He said, "What do you think of this? Playing together?" And I think it was John's best improvisation. I don't think that improvisation always came easily to John, but as he was playing freely, and it was as if it really reflected the lyric rather wonderfully. I felt that it had turned into a folk tune, and he was this aspect of running free. I get the feeling that it reflects the two characters, and it's very. I find it very sensual, and it's fast and frantic and evocative.
So was this mainly kind of written in the studio? I think you went to Holland for the recordings. So you had the two tracks, the Spectral Mornings and Clocks, and then because I'm always curious about writing process. What was going through your head at this point to try to that this was the material that came out of it?
That was largely a studio construct. Originally I was going to base it all on two 12 strings, but two 12 strings never sounded quite right. But we ended up with 12 strings and two harpsichords on it to create the multi-layered arpeggio approach, which was not a million miles away from Genesis. The lyrics I'd written very quickly while I'd had a couple of glasses of wine, and I was looking in a book called A Victorian Book of Flowers, and so the lyrics were all made up from flower names, which
very nice.
Plus the idea of Virgin and the Gypsy, which was, I'd not read the book and I'd not seen the film, but I had a rough idea what it was all about. And I was very interested to read the book after I'd done the song and see that he'd used D.H. Lawrence had used words that were similar. In other words, he seemed to be fond of using words that had color implied in them, such as marigold, etc. And I felt that in a way he was a writer painting with words because he also painted, and I was a musician who was trying to paint with sound
Right.
and also the lyrics. So color was very important to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm very fond of it as a tune. A few years ago, I revived it and I was doing it
Right.
live, and it worked wonderfully well. I have to
Yeah.
say, it was very beautiful and very lovely, and blah blah blah. Very proud of it. So I was
Yeah.
proud of the entire album.
Yeah.
Now, the tracks that follow, I'm
Hmm.
thinking, Red Flower of Tai Chi.
Yeah.
Written largely on two instruments. Uh,
Is that the koto on that one, or
yeah,
is it
that's
right?
right. Koto on that. And also I'd written it also on the six string electric
Okay.
on a clean sound. But it was tuned to an open E. So
Okay.
not for
Yeah.
the first time I was using an open E.
Hmm.
That tuning, I'd used the open E tuning for the first track on Please Don't Touch as
Right.
well, Narnia.
Yeah.
Um, uh, the band, absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
Loved working with them. Young band, very enthusiastic.
Hmm. And you had
Um,
been road tested at that point. You kind of knew
yes,
what people could do and where you
it
could kind
was
of draw things out from them, I would imagine.
it was it was rather wonderful to be heading off to Holland again,
Hmm.
much like the last album I did with Genesis, which was
Right.
largely recorded in Hilvarenbeek. This was
Hmm.
Hilversum phonogram headquarters and radio
Okay.
station.
Hmm.
Temperatures were sub-zero, frozen lake. Um, there literally was nothing to do between the hotel, which was just a motel,
Right.
and the recording studio. So everything we did, we worked, we partied, we like crazy
Yeah.
um, in the recording studio, and it was a huge studio.
Okay.
You could have fitted an orchestra or two in
Hmm.
there, but we made great use of the space by putting
Hmm.
every mic in the place up for John Shearer's drum solo
Right.
on clocks.
Yeah.
So it's a very ambient um, sounding um, a drum sound
Yeah.
towards the end of that piece.
Yeah. What is
Uh,
great about one of the things that just I re-listened a couple times yesterday in preparation for this, and it was like, albums can sound dated, but even
yeah,
with it really doesn't. It has a mood to it, and it's pretty consistent in its sound, but it doesn't scream late 70s either, in my
right.
ears at least.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We had a multi-layered keyboard sound for the intro of the first track every day.
Hmm.
And I think I played an electric and probably an acoustic at the
Hmm.
same time. So we had that combination of clavinet, something that sounded like a pipe organ,
Yeah.
RMI piano, probably a couple of guitars, if I remember correctly, through
Hmm.
chorus. Before chorus units appeared, you had jazz chorus amps,
Hmm.
the Roland JC
Right.
chorus things, and uh, the first track we recorded was
Mm.
Spectral Mornings, and we played it
Okay.
absolutely live. And John Aycock, bless
Hmm.
him, who's no longer of this
Hmm.
earth, but recorded us wonderfully.
Yeah.
It sounded big and monumental, and as I remembered it live,
Hmm.
big speakers played it back
Yeah.
loud-ish. And I don't think we were blinded by volume. I think it's very easy to be seduced by volume. You play something
Yeah.
back large in a
Yeah.
large studio, large speakers, blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah blah, as people worked in those days, and uh, um, you could be seduced by volume by playing it loud, thinking it sounds powerful.
Right.
The reality is that something has to sound powerful on small speakers,
Yeah.
and so once you've got that right, then feel free to play that back on things that are
Mm.
huge. But recording was slightly different in those days. It was analog. It was 24 track. It was a rather wonderful studio.
Yeah.
Um, we were um, we were not sober. Um, we
You were young guys. You were probably all in your
we were young
20s at that
guys.
point.
We
So
were in our
yeah.
20s, that's right. And I was, let me see, was I 27? Was I 20? I think I was probably 28,
Yeah, sure.
29, that sort of time. So I was still the right side of 30 for a young
Mhm.
blade. And
Right.
I thoroughly enjoyed myself
Mm.
doing the album.
Right.
There was the nylon moment as well, because I'd started to introduce nylon guitar into
Yeah.
the Genesis
Hmm.
sound canvas,
Yeah.
as evinced on Wind and Wuthering.
Yeah.
There were a few moments of that because
Yeah.
usually acoustic guitar things were dominated by 12 strings with
Right.
Genesis, but I got both on this particular album. So
Right.
you had electric, um, you had both types of acoustic. Nylon guitars became increasingly important to me
Yeah.
over time. Um, Again, it's a very seductive sound.
Yeah.
I was always trying to produce the Segovia sound,
Mm.
um, and I realized over time it wasn't all dependent on mics and
Yeah.
position. It was largely dependent on how you're playing, the shape of your nails, the
Hmm.
length of your nails. It's at the hand position,
Hmm. Sure.
absolutely like this. It's
Okay.
square on as opposed to like this, and
Okay.
it's quite a difficult thing to achieve. But if you do, you're plucking the string right in the center
Yeah.
at right angles, and that produces a very it can produce a very sweet tone, which is what I was after. So
Yeah.
on let me see now. One more track, I think, Ballad of the Decomposing Man
Yes.
was basically a comedy track.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny listening to it yesterday,
yeah,
that and Lost Time in Cordoba, which
yeah,
is again a lot of the nylon on there.
mm,
Those were maybe because I hadn't thought about them a lot recently.
yeah.
They were almost like the two standout tracks where I was like, oh, they're kind of like the unsung gems of the album because,
Ah,
again, Every Day and Spectral Mornings, Clots get a
yeah,
lot of the heavy love of the tracks on there, and you still
yeah.
play a lot of those live, and it's like,
Sure,
oh, but then there's a couple of these tracks that are a little bit quieter, a little bit quirkier,
sure. Yes.
and but they
Um,
really have they really have a character to them, which was really nice.
I think that as a lifelong Beatles fan, the influence of vaudeville and the earlier era was
Mhm.
being reflected, um, with the approach of
Yeah,
Ballad of the Decomposing Man, the sort of cheeky chappy,
yeah,
very, very English
hmm,
stuff from an earlier era, the George Formby
yeah,
impression. Um, George Formby, I think, very important to the Beatles.
yeah,
Ukulele, banjolele, cheeky chappy,
yeah,
all of that era when um, entertainment was bright and breezy
yeah,
during the war years, and post all of that, everything deliberately lightweight, of
yeah,
course.
yeah,
So that was fine. Lost Time in Cordoba was again a synth
yeah.
trying to sound like an oboe.
Hmm.
Um, why the hell we didn't use the real thing, I don't know, but I think we managed to pull it off with Genesis.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, that
So
you guys always did seem to be like, well, if we can do it ourselves, we'll do it ourselves, and
yeah, I
that
think I
was
think
the
that was it.
challenge of it. Yeah, almost.
That was it. That there was if Please Don't Touch was outsourcing to other people outside any particular band, wide range of influences,
Hmm.
people right across the board.
Yeah.
The idea of white and black performers,
Hmm.
what they could bring to the table. If anything was close to white soul,
Hmm.
it was that.
Yeah.
And then once again, a band trying to do it very much in-house,
Yeah.
finding that the band was very, very capable, even though it
Right.
was all analog instruments. Um, if it was the sound of uh, what a what a World War II a bomber, a
Hmm.
Humber Hawk, sounded like.
Yeah.
it seemed that if you had bass pedals,
Hmm.
which where you had oscillators beating and just made it a low drone, you could have them beat against each other, and it sounded remarkably like that, and a dogfight that was created.
Yeah.
Um, with the idea of just white noise from a synth sounding a
Hmm.
little bit like ACAC guns,
Hmm.
and Dick Cadbury doing an impression, just holding his hands like this, Foxtrot, Uncle Charlie, small voice backing away from the mic, and John doing these chromatic runs on the flute. I was very proud of what we were able to do, and also the spiritual aspect of the lyric. Quite a lot of death became a sort of central figure
Yeah.
with the lyrics of that album, particularly the memoirs of Lord Dowding, who'd been
Okay.
the commander-in-chief of the Battle of Britain.
Okay.
Um, these days, I probably would have gone into that in more detail on the sleeve notes, but
Mm.
as I was a member of the Spiritist Association of Great Britain, from their small library, I took out his book, and he was talking about airmen have been blown up in dogfights, instantly discarnate but confused.
Mm.
And I was always and still am interested in the idea of the survival of the soul
Sure.
after death. And I figured there aren't too many pop songs about death that goes into it. But my father was saying, oh, he found it. Why was I so interested in that? It seemed depressing to him. But I
Mm.
said, well, the thing is that I'm not interested in death as much as the survival and the
Right.
transformation and the transcendent,
Yeah.
whatever happens afterwards, which I'm convinced does exist,
Hmm.
some form of continued life. And so that was a central theme of
Mm.
of the album. It crops up in, um, if not every song,
Yeah.
it's pretty much
Yeah.
omnipresent throughout the album, and of course colored its title as
Yeah.
Spectral
Right.
Mornings.
True. Yeah.
Uh,
It's funny with some of those things you don't think about the obvious reference right away, and Spectral is one of those kind of things where it's like, oh yeah, that's if with Tiger Moth and some of these other kind
yes,
of lyrics, kind of referencing loss, death, passing,
yes,
whatever it might be. It's like,
mm,
oh yeah, that makes sense in a way. So yeah,
yes,
so it's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. The
So I'm
yeah.
still quite fond of the album and all its anomalies. And again, I think um, it was I remember two tracks that I was stumbling on quite a lot. Um, Tiger Moth, which really
Right.
was in two parts. We had the instrumental part, we had whatever that conveyed, but also the song,
Right.
which um, I think that if it hadn't been the emphasis on so much doing it in-house, I would have used, and I could still do this if I went
Mm.
back to the original tapes,
Right.
piano accordion, um, clarinet. But
Yeah.
Nick was doing facsimiles of those things on analog synths, and
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
felt we
funny
were
for a
making a
darker
film.
song. For a
Hmm.
darker song, especially that the lyrical part of it, it sounds almost whimsical in a way. It's
Yes,
which is
yes,
an interesting contrast to the lyrical content there, which is a
yes,
way to make it go down a little smoother sometimes to kind of
yes.
have a feel like that.
It's a funny chorus that's singing about being, in a very hearty way, being blown to smithereens.
Right.
But it's old World War II speak in a way, and so there is a heartiness about it.
Yeah.
Um, I probably wouldn't attack that subject matter in the same way,
Hmm.
but this is a product of young minds,
Right.
um, and I think that the whole album hung together very well.
Right.
Um, I think the tracks over time, musicians do this, I suspect.
Yeah.
Certain tracks you think, oh yes, well that's classic, so that's a
Right.
keeper, and then other things that you might be ashamed of, and etc. etc. As with Genesis, because I've heard them
Sure.
dismiss things, and then only to say, well, actually, I think it was all about this. Tony Banks
Right.
recently saying, for him, Genesis was all about, in retrospect, Supper's Ready.
Mm.
Um, So I would counter that by saying, well, I think that it was about Foxtrot and selling England by the pound. That for me is the
Right.
golden period of, very wide canvas,
Right.
a wide church, whatever you might think. Lots of influences in there,
Yeah.
not a one horse trick, and not a weak track on either of those albums. So
Correct. Right.
I was always trying to make something that would be my equivalent of a
Yeah.
Genesis album, where I could go away and be equally
Yeah.
equally proud, if you like. So I would have, when Stephen Wilson was doing a surround sound mix
Right.
of for the box set
Yep.
of Spectral Mornings, he was playing back, Ballad of Decomposing Man, and
Yeah.
I was apologizing for its whatever. And he said, "Well, it's just a bit of fun, isn't it?" And I said,
Right.
"Yes, I was feeling exposed once again. It's the
Yeah.
sort of thing that you did when Pete Hicks, for instance, having had a
Mm.
drink or several at 3 in the morning, doing an impression of the caretaker who comes
Yes.
in, and
Right.
that's on some versions of the album and not
Right.
others. And I think that the last version we did, we left a long gap
Right.
and used it so that it would be there as an addition.
Yeah.
Um,
I know
um,
that when I got it first, again, I was didn't get it when it first came out. I was 8 years old or whatever at the time.
Bit
And I
young.
didn't think I heard it until it was on the CD version from probably 2006 or so, because I
Yeah,
had a
yeah,
vinyl version at some point that I probably bought in the 90s or maybe the 80s,
yeah,
and it wasn't on there. I know for certain
right.
it wasn't on there. So it's
Yeah.
you get these little bonus
It
things
was
later on in life. Yeah.
it was part of the album originally, but
Yeah.
Tony Stratton Smith, who was the label boss, said he didn't think that it helped the album, so
Mm.
he basically asked me to leave it off. So I did, but I thought,
Yeah.
well, let's reinstate it
Yeah.
for the completists and for those who might have more forgiving ears.
Right.
And once again, it was an album that charted, so I was
Yeah.
very pleased because Please Don't Touch, for all its invention and what have
Hmm.
you, um, didn't chart in the same way that
Okay.
Voyage of the Acolyte did. So
Right.
it was great to feel that I was a success again.
Sure.
Because when you've got the pressure of, okay, you're in a band
Hmm.
and it goes from doing clubs to arenas,
Hmm.
um, and suddenly you're on your own. It is quite a pressure,
Hmm.
and I think it's part of what made me sick when I was doing Please Don't Touch,
Sure.
that I thought, oh, if one more edit comes apart, I'm just going to have a complete nervous breakdown,
Right.
every time something went wrong with that. But now I'm detached from it and I can listen to it separately
Yeah.
and think, well, these are the good points. These are
Yeah.
the points that I might change. And if I ever do a
Right.
revisited of the personal stuff, I can always take
Yeah.
what's what's good and
Hmm.
change these things. Sometimes these albums have been remastered and with a
Right.
wider stereo, so you get increased effect.
Yeah.
Both Please Don't Touch and Spectral were done in proper surround by
Right.
Stephen Wilson.
That's what I listened to
At one
yesterday
point,
when I was
oh,
going
that's
through it.
interesting.
Yeah.
You listen to it in,
Yeah.
in surround.
If I have that option, I tend to
Yes.
go in that way because it
Mm,
is,
yes.
I like the kind of, wider palette that you
Yes.
can get that way. And it's just kind of, if I'm going to sit and listen to something, that's kind
Yes.
of what I option. If I'm going for a walk and I have headphones on or something, I would,
Yep.
I don't have a surround option at that point. So totally I'm fine
Right.
with the old stereo or a new stereo
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah.
yeah, but if I'm going to sit and listen to something, I'm like, let me hear this version and see maybe what I missed in the past every once in a
Yeah.
while. So yeah, but
Well,
yeah, has there
very,
been
very good.
this is a little off of Spectral Mornings for a bit. I know on that box set there were kind of the Fates around versions of Voyage of the Acolyte and Defector.
Yes.
Has
Yes.
there have any of those older tapes for those albums been found? Any of the multi tracks, or is that still a
No,
mystery at this point?
it's still a mystery.
Yeah.
It's it's very difficult. On the plus side,
Hmm.
um, what was interesting was that the pseudo or fake
Hmm.
surrounds I felt were very good. What
Right.
I liked was the way, quite randomly, it divided things up
Mhm.
and particularly a track such as The Hands of the Priestess, for
Sure.
instance. If you hear that in surround,
Hmm.
straight away the bell tree at the beginning
Hmm.
starts to zoom backwards and forwards,
Hmm.
um, and to the side, and the whole thing's moving from the word go. And I think, wow, couldn't have done this better myself. This is
Sure.
fully immersive,
Yeah.
and I really like what happens. Now, people are divided about this, but I really liked the surround that was randomized by the technology,
Hmm.
and I found it hugely interesting
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
find
because
what it
it's
had done. It was,
yeah.
I
It's not
thought
a
it was
choice you would
bloody
have made
marvelous.
yourself, but it's
No,
like you hear it in a different way, and it doesn't, in my mind, surround mixes never replace an original version, but
no,
it's another option. It's another listening option. So I'm all for them, and I like that you've been putting out your newer albums with surround versions and everything. So,
yes.
it's
I've
because
got a real challenge with new stuff that I've
yeah,
got a number of engineers who've done things on it because Roger is retired now, or
right, yeah,
at least retired as far as my stuff is
yeah,
concerned. But it may well be that he does classical stuff or film stuff
yeah,
or whatever. I think
mhm,
classical is his first love,
sure,
I suspect,
mhm,
and the more challenging
yeah,
classical stuff. But
yeah,
um, uh, as I say, I loved what it did,
yeah,
what it threw up. So you had four albums, all of which the
yeah,
first four,
hmm,
Acolyte, Please Don't Touch, Spectral
hmm,
Mornings, and Defector, all have very interesting things that go on
yeah,
within the surround.
hmm,
And I suspect that one day I should probably I need to get the surround sound thing set up in my new studio
okay,
in the new house.
yes,
But I'm very close to finishing a new album, and then we
absolutely,
have to think about the surround sound possibilities, or
right,
whether the Atmos version with seven speakers is
hmm,
better than the five. It'll fold down into five anyway.
right,
But I really like some of the things that were
yeah,
done, and I, I, people are divided with this. Some people like stereo and
yeah,
ambience behind.
yeah,
Um, Adapted stereo doesn't really work for me.
yeah,
I think that things need to be more immersive and
yeah,
instruments need to wrap around. I
yeah,
think as if you're sitting there in the rehearsal room, you've just dreamt it up, and the keyboards happen
yeah,
to be over there, and the drums happen to be over there,
yeah,
and if you can be brave enough to think in terms of what the human ear will do when
yeah,
you're part of either being a band or an orchestra, hugely interesting things will go on.
yeah,
And I like my surround mixes to be brave. If there was
yes,
any criticism aimed at the early Genesis surrounds, I think that they started to become much more interesting by the time of Wind and Wuthering,
sure,
where I think surround was used to very good
yeah,
effect. Before that, I find it a little conservative, although I
yeah,
know that originally, Peter Gabriel rejected The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway
yeah,
surround, and it was done again. And I think that that's very good. So that's
yeah,
fully immersive, and
yeah,
lots of detail crops up that um, I had no idea was in there.
yeah,
Missing guitar parts,
right,
extra bits of percussion,
right,
lots of stuff going on. And that really was an ideal album for
yeah,
that because it's chock full of detail,
yeah,
double album.
right. Yeah, when I got to go to, they had a playback in New York for The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and it was in one of these Dolby Atmos theaters,
Yeah.
which is probably the best I'll ever hear the album or any
Yes.
album because
Yes.
it's in that environment literally created to reproduce this. And there were
Yes.
backing vocals that I had never heard before, and
Yep.
again, like you said, little bits of percussion, guitar, I mean,
Yep.
keyboards, things, and I was just like, yeah, this is a very different experience, but it's still at the
Yes.
core the same album. It's just that
Yes.
you're hearing it with, different layers exposed, which, going back
Yeah.
to Spectral Mornings, it's the same thing where, I never, I don't know if it was like listening to Tiger Moth. I never
Yeah.
quite realized maybe with the original mix that there's the count in kind of with the kind of processed vocals counting into
Yeah.
that track.
Yes.
When I was listening to it yesterday, I'm like, oh, I never thought about this, or I had never really
Yes.
actively noticed it before. And I was like, oh, it's nice that I'm still noticing things about this
Yeah.
music, 20, 30 years on, 40 years on from when I first heard it or whenever. So,
Yeah. It's
that's
it was talking into a vocoder where I
right.
think everything was open. All of the
Yeah.
keys were open, so
Yeah.
um, it wasn't intended to be
Right.
musical.
Right.
It was supposed to sound demonic, and it did.
Yes, exactly.
Um, that was
So,
it. Guitar synth was also being used on
right.
that album, as I used on Please Don't Touch.
Yeah.
The GR 500
Right.
Roland, it wasn't great at triggering, but if you hit a chord
Mm-hmm.
and you were using sort of a fan flamenco effect,
Yeah.
you could get the effect of syndrums at the same time as
Right.
a chord, and
Yeah.
it's all done in one go.
Well,
So
and that's what's
uh,
like, those are the things that could have sound dated too, because
yeah,
technology, especially new technology, can sometimes be when you hear it 10, 20, 30 years on, you're like, oh, that's very late 70s or whatever. But it
yeah,
doesn't, it just didn't have that flavor for me, which was nice. It still kind of felt, I don't think it felt modern, but it felt timeless in a way that was just like, oh yeah,
yes,
this isn't tied into the late 70s. Whereas when a lot of
yes,
things started happening in the early 80s, whether it was with drum machines or, different production choices that were made, that the
yeah,
80s does have a very specific sonic palette to it that
yes,
can sometimes scream, this is from the 80s.
yes,
So,
yes.
it's not
I
as
know
not as
there's
tied
certain
to
things.
that.
Yeah, I think certain drum sounds, sampled snares that are
Right.
very bright, etc.
Yeah.
Part and parcel of 80s pop
Yeah.
sensibility,
Yeah. Mm.
and sometimes working to very good effect. But I wasn't trying to make something that was a generically 70s
Right.
album. I was just trying to do perhaps what I always do, unless I'm doing an acoustic album,
Mm.
trying to do something in a classical style, which can be cinematic in its own way, or siesta,
Mhm.
or drift off to this.
Mhm.
But when doing a rock album, I realized that the philosophy of that I had, which I think was in parallel
Mhm.
with early Genesis, was to
Mhm.
make the music as inclusive as
Mhm.
possible. So we used the word progressive, of course, and it's become shortened to prog,
Mhm.
the four-letter word, which gives it a certain irony, of course. But I would say inclusive. That by 1967, actually 66.
Mhm.
Hate to mention it, but back to the Beatles and
Yeah.
Revolver,
Mhm.
from track to track, it was full of surprises. What are
Yeah.
they going to use? Are they going to use the sounds that they can produce themselves, or are they going to hand it over to other musicians?
Right.
And so the references are going to be wider, whether it's Indian or classical.
Mhm.
Um, Suddenly, there was this big shift of, well, if we're going to have the world's ear, we better be damn good at
Mhm.
it.
Right.
And they did. They delivered in droves.
Yeah.
Um, so in a way, that set the bar in terms of not necessarily execution, but it set the bar in terms of being as imaginative
Mhm.
as possible.
Right.
So you had moments of children's tunes,
Mhm.
nursery rhymes, um, the effect of which wasn't lost on Genesis with nursery
Right.
crime, etc.
Mhm. Sure.
But the idea that the shackles were off, you could do anything.
Yeah.
Post Sergeant Pepper, the difficulty is that very few bands had access to the degree of manpower
Mhm.
and huge teams to bring those whimsical ideas
Right.
to the fore. Um, by then, of course, we were gaining mellotrons and synths, and
Right.
in the pre-sampling days, although strictly speaking, of course, yeah, the rhyme of the ancient sampler has been evinced by the mellotron. I'm just
Yeah.
staring at a mellotron book that this
Ah.
tablet is resting on, in fact.
Ah, okay.
Um, and I mean, we were all enthralled to the mellotron,
Yeah.
the wonders of mellotron. I seem to remember Tony Banks saying to me, "Oh, listening to the Beatles stuff that was going on at one point," and he said we were just assuming that everything was done on the mellotron.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't.
Hardly,
Yeah.
hardly. It
Hmm.
crops up from time to time and used to very good effect.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of inclusive music very, very important. I think if you're doing a rock album, it should be weird and wonderful and as varied as
Yeah.
a three-ring circus going on
Yeah.
simultaneously.
Right. Which you
That's
still do to
how
this
do I see it.
day, you still
And
that's
I do that because I want people to be taken on a journey
yeah.
um, when they listen to something, and um, comfort zone doesn't come into it. It's
Right.
surprise me, take me to the seaside, take me to Brighton, take me
Hmm.
to the little take me to the deck chairs and the little sheds and all things that are
Yeah.
English, but at the
Hmm.
same time, yes,
Yeah.
take me to Hong Kong Harbour,
Yeah.
take me to India, take me to all sorts of places, but do it well. If you can use the
Yeah.
real instruments,
Hmm.
um, that's wonderful. But the era that we describe as psychedelia, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm quite sure that a lot of it was drug driven, etc. But at the same time, the idea of experimenting with backwards tapes and
Yeah.
tape speeds and echoes and effects, music was becoming ever more
Yeah.
visual. Although if you went right back to the 1950s,
Hmm.
you'd be listening to Sparky the Magic Piano, a
Right.
vocoded
Hmm.
piano,
Yeah.
talking piano. You'd have singing dogs that had been tuned, cut up.
Right.
Um, there were all
Well,
sorts of
there's all the
things. So
new toys. It's
experimentation
yeah.
was there, but suddenly the Beatles made it on the Parlophone label. The fact
Yeah.
that that was a comedy label, where
Mm.
um, I think that it again, I have to say the shackles were off,
Yeah. Well,
and
that's what's great about that
I
era,
wish they'd
the
stay off.
60s yeah, well, and it's nice that you can still do that now, just in,
Yes.
with your band, with the support that you have and everything. And
Yeah.
I think the fans enjoy hearing kind of whatever's kind of coming out at this, but whatever's coming out of your
Yeah.
musical generation at this point. So it's,
Well,
it's fun.
yes. After a while, in fact, while we were doing Wind the Wuthering, I
Yeah.
discovered an instrument called the octagon,
Right.
and
Sure.
I started to use that from time to time,
Hmm.
and still do from time to time.
Right.
Um, when I was doing Defective, the very last track, Sentimental Institution, which is
Yes.
basically
I always love that track. It's fun.
I like it because
Yeah.
I think that Pete Hicks did a great job
Hmm.
on it. I know that Phil Collins liked it when he came and saw us
Hmm.
live. He thought that was very funny, and
Yeah.
Pete an extraordinary sort of cross between Noel Coward and a kind of send up of the Bing Crosby era as well.
Right.
All of that, but it meant that instrument, which was like an interactive record player,
Hmm.
um, at the press of a button, you would get a riff, and it would be anything from a jazz band
Hmm.
playing that riff to well, strings or anything.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in a way, it was a little bit like the successor to the Mellotron.
Yeah.
It was very lo-fi.
Hmm.
Somebody described it as lo-fi heaven when you're
Right.
messing around with it. But then, the Mellotron, I remember when a synthesizer museum was inaugurated and Bob
Mm.
Moog came along. This was a place that was near one of the airports, the Stansted. That's it.
Okay.
And the thing that drew the biggest crowd was the Mellotron,
Mm,
and
sure.
I think it was the left-hand manual with all the pre-recorded riffs
Yeah.
that the Beatles used from time to
Hmm.
time. the fast flamenco introduction to
Hmm.
one of the tunes on the White Album, um,
Sure.
whether it was the beginning or end of mm, Bungalow Bill.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Suddenly you had a performance,
Hmm.
and I've got this thing that I describe as found music. If you're going
Right.
to use that, then you're going to use a performance that someone else has done, whether it's a blinding salvo of notes in flamenco
Yeah.
style, um, which you hope to be able to do yourself. And on a good night, I can. But at that time, I certainly couldn't. And
Yeah.
well, why not use that?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Right.
It's in the editing.
Yeah.
Um, there will be things that you cannot do. You can't suddenly be a string quartet, and then I hear some of
Mhm.
your listeners saying, "Well, actually, you can these days. You can just speak into AI, and it'll deliver it to you
Yes. Hmm.
instantly."
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the idea of finding something that might be usable as an arrangement that you would never normally use
Yeah.
of of something and crafting it into a song. So you're doing variations on someone else's theme or themes
Yeah.
or a patchwork quilt of possibilities. By the time you sew it all together,
Yeah.
um, you can come up with something quite extraordinary. So I'm not the first
Hmm.
person to have used the octagon to good effect. But
Right.
sentimental institution, there you are. It's um,
Yeah. Well,
um,
well, it's of that
it's an
era where
earlier
it's
era.
yeah, and it's of that, Spectral Mornings Defector era that has, a real, wealth of creativity to it. And with the band, can you talk a little bit about the personalities or what
Certainly.
kind of people like Nick
Yeah.
Magnus and John Aycock
Yes.
and what did they bring to the recording process or, the arranging
Um,
process even?
they all brought something
Yeah.
unique. I loved them all.
Yeah.
Um, for instance, Dick Cadbury
Hmm.
brought, as well as being a fine bass player, he brought
Hmm.
the ability to be able to craft vocal harmonies,
Okay.
either parallel or moving round. He was involved with a band called Decameron,
Okay.
who used vocal harmonies to very good effect. He'd been trained as a countertenor,
Hmm.
which means that he could sing in a falsetto voice as well as full voice. And
Hmm.
Pete Hicks had an extraordinary, beautiful voice.
Hmm.
Um, and I added a third harmony myself.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was the lead line, sometimes it was someone else. And so when you hear those harmonies on three tracks that come to mind,
Hmm.
Every Day,
Yeah.
Virgin and the Gypsy, where you've got the antiphonal or answering
Yeah.
harmonies. And by the time we were doing the Toast on Defector,
Defector.
again you had harmonies driving it, and we did one or two others
Yeah.
with that sound. Pete was a fine solo singer.
Hmm.
Um, I think that I was learning all the
Hmm.
time about singing, and um, for some reason, the older I get, the more I become focused on this.
Mm.
It was something Richie Havens said to me. He said, "You know what the most beautiful instrument is in the world?" And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "The human voice." And I said, "Yours, maybe, not mine." And at the time, I had no confidence in
Sure.
my vocal ability, even though I'd sung passably on a couple of things.
Right.
It wasn't till later I got to explore the upper register, the lower
Yeah.
register, and
I mean,
realize why think some things worked and think some things that didn't, and vibrato and tone, all of that.
yeah. It is the most you're really exposing yourself when you sing.
Yeah, yeah,
It is
yeah,
something that, that singers, talk about all the time, that it is,
sure.
your people can practice their instrument and you can practice
Yes,
your voice in different ways
yes,
and
yes,
teach it certain things, but it's
yes.
also, if if you break a string, you can just replace it. If your voice goes out for the night, you're kind of screwed. So it's like
Yeah,
that's
that's true.
yeah.
And voices change. Funnily
Yeah.
enough, I was doing a vocal recently with Ricardo Romano,
Hmm.
um, and he was saying because we were about to finish work
Hmm.
and have food around about 6 o'clock, and he said,
Hmm.
"Why don't you save your voice until 6?
Hmm.
Because he said if you try and sing this first thing in the morning, you're going to
Hmm.
sound strained. Your voice will open up."
Hmm.
And I sang a vocal that had been a problem vocal,
Hmm.
and it just seemed to fly.
Right.
And the ad libs worked, and I was getting the upper range,
Okay.
and I was able to listen to it detached, as if that's
Hmm.
another singer. And if you can get it to the point where you think, I'm glad I didn't hire another singer to do this. I can
Hmm.
do this myself.
Right.
I can't do every tune,
Sure.
but I can I can do something else. I can rough it up if I need to.
Yeah.
I can sing sweetly.
Hmm.
I can do a track like Solid Ground, which was on Blues with a Feeling,
Mm. Right.
where I'm just ripping and being as
Hmm.
unsubtle as possible, singing as loudly as possible, and it sounds like a rock singer.
Yeah.
That's fine. But the in between thing, where
Hmm.
you're in that area where it's soul singing,
Mm.
and you get that thing that black singers have got and gifted white singers have got.
Hmm.
There's an area that I think no, I'm probably closer in spirit to a country singer.
Okay.
I can achieve what country can do. I can sing high, I can sing low. I
Yeah.
sound like different singers in different ranges, but that Gabriel Collins sound,
Hmm.
I ain't never going to sound like Richie Havens, not this
Right.
lifetime.
Yeah.
Never
Well,
mind
and
Howlin'
you
Wolf.
right, exactly. Well, that's the thing, and you learn over time what you can do and
Yeah, yeah,
what's both, what you can push yourself to do, what comes
yeah,
easily, and then what comes, in a different way with that.
sure.
Like you had worked with Nick Magnus for quite a while
Yes,
with
yes,
keyboards and worked with him into the future, into the 80s
mm,
and everything. So what
yes,
was, and it seems like I've always thought kind of as a fan kind of watching these albums, listening to these albums, that
yes,
you've always had a strong relationship with a keyboard player, both back in
yes,
Genesis and then with Nick
yes,
Magnus, then with Roger
yes,
King. So and that
yes,
seems like an obvious pairing because keyboards and
yes,
guitars can both complement, they can, do the same but similar,
yeah,
same but different things. So what was
yes.
working with Nick like in that case with Nick Magnus?
Um, well, when I first met Nick,
Hmm.
he was extremely nervous. When I first spoke to him on the phone, he thought it was one of his friends playing a joke and didn't think it was me at all.
Hmm.
And then, of course, I showed up at the place he was living and he was
Hmm.
playing me a few things, clavinet, etc.
Right.
And just out of the blue, I said to him, fully expecting that he's going to say, "No, I can't do that."
Hmm.
I said, you don't have anything that's like a pipe organ sound. And
Hmm.
he said, just so happens, yes. He had a thing called a Vox string thing,
Okay.
and he'd rewired it so that you could hook up all of the octaves together. And he played a chord, and that is the sound
Hmm.
that's on Spectral Mornings. It's the full organ
Hmm.
sound that pipe organs make. And I knew right then and there, this is the man for the job. He's
Hmm.
thinking along the same lines as me. So I provided them with a mellotron.
Right.
Um, um, and I think that Nick at the time was very pleased to be working
Hmm.
together.
Right.
We got on very well. I admired what he could do.
Hmm.
Um, I was fully enraptured.
Yeah.
I have to say. Um, so I have worked with very gifted keyboard players, and I often forget to mention Julian Kolbeck, who also was
Right.
very,
Hmm.
very, very gifted, because I tend to mention the other three,
Yeah.
or do I mean four? But so while we're talking about what everyone brought
Yeah.
to the Spectral Mornings, Dick Cadbury, as I say, he was a fine bass
Yeah.
player.
Hmm.
Um, very gifted harmonically,
Hmm.
very good at harmonies, very able to choreograph vocal harmonies. Um, very very driven
Hmm.
at the sound. He was from the Cadbury family, the well-known um, chocolate
Right. Oh, he's
family.
actually
So,
connected to
yeah,
that.
he's
I
actually
didn't
connected with
realize
that.
that.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, that's within the family. They're, I think, originally a Quaker family. So
Okay.
I think he'd had the influence of that.
Sure.
I don't know what Quakers believe, but we shouldn't get into that here. But anyway, then there was my brother. Of course, we'd
Right.
grown up together. So between us, we were able to manage a few guitars between
Hmm.
us. John was able to manage flute very well.
Right.
Um, I was just getting to grips with singing early days.
Hmm.
I was able to do harmonica.
Hmm.
So blues was important to us when we were young.
Right.
Um, and it still is
Yeah.
important to me.
Yeah.
Um,
And John Shearer on drums, excuse
yeah,
me, just seemed to be able to do both the very heavy pieces, but
yeah,
also have a light touch about things and be able
yes,
to do the lighter things also, which
yes.
was nice.
Um, yeah, I mean, he came in with a ton of confidence.
Hmm.
He had this shining oil rig of a drum set where they were all silver. So when the lights hit it, boy, did you know it. And he was a personality. So yeah, he was a great drummer. Crowds absolutely loved him. And he get up on when he was introduced on stage, get up on the drum stool, wiggle his bum at the audience. They loved all that spandex lyrics, whatever he
Right.
was wearing.
Right.
And so he was, the nearest thing to Rod Stewart that we had in the band,
Right.
and a drum playing Mr. Stewart.
Right. Right.
They were all very strong
Yeah.
personalities. I was still trying to be, um, I guess, ringmaster in a way, as I've
Right.
been on, or somewhere between a ringmaster and a midwife.
Right.
I think that my role often in music is to sometimes do variations on other people's ideas.
Hmm.
Um, um, the role in Genesis was, if I couldn't always be the parent to something, be midwife to it, make sure
Right.
that if anyone's got anything interesting to offer, then to jump on it immediately and bring out
Yeah.
the best of that,
Yeah.
to be as receptive as possible.
Right.
Uh,
And
yeah,
I imagine at that point it's about trying to draw things out of people. If
yes,
you're trying to kind of get something from them, it might be in your head, and so you try to convey that to your musical partners in that. But
yes,
also, if they do something surprising, to kind of be able to jump on that also and be like, "Oh, that's a
yes.
good idea. Let's follow that down that path."
It's very rare that I think of an album, although it has my name on it
Mhm.
at the top. It's very rare that I think of it as a solo album.
Mhm.
There's also John Aycock and the wonderful things that he
Right.
brought to bear, because he was particularly good with engineering and reverbs and various things.
Mhm.
And he was infinitely patient with me.
Right.
Um, I didn't always know what I wanted.
Right. Yeah.
Please don't touch. I was probably, my most divided in a way, but I think I've
Mhm.
always tried to sound like a band. If
Right.
you come out of Genesis, which is a band full of strong characters,
Yeah.
and you're going to follow it with something, it better be damn good, let's face
Yeah.
it. There's
Sure.
no point just coming up with, a few threadbare ideas. You've got to be able to think like all five
Yeah.
people at least. And then if you can think like an orchestra, if you can think like a composer on top
Yeah.
of that, then
Yeah.
you have a chance of going further into
Right.
other other realms. So it's a
Yeah.
number of hats. I've always wanted to sound like a band. Oh,
Mhm.
isn't that a
Yeah.
great band? What was that?
Exactly.
Who were they? Oh, well, it's a he. But
Yeah.
but then
Right.
I've resisted up to now calling anything the Steve Hackett band.
Right.
And answers on a postcard.
Yes, if there's any
Hackett's
ideas
tribe,
out there,
etc.,
right?
Colony
Yeah,
tribe, etc. But I've never been able to dream up, apart from GTR,
yeah,
never been able to
mm,
dream up a decent
yeah,
name for a band. So I've always stuck with the solo
yeah.
thing.
In the late 70s, were you a home demo guy? Would you like how would you prepare material to bring to the band? Or would you just
I
kind of be
I
with your
did.
guitar playing okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had some of the worst demos in the world with me singing really badly and out of
Right.
tune, but it would get the melody
Give the ideas, right.
across.
Mhm.
Um, so yes, I was. I not very developed, but I think
Sure.
it was kind of, when you listen to some of these Beatles anthology things and you
Hmm.
hear Lennon um, practically whispering into a tape with an
Yeah.
acoustic guitar doing, I am the Walrus.
Yeah. Hmm.
You would have no idea what that was,
Yeah.
the tapestry that was going to be woven
Hmm.
from from that, and so many inclusive ideas, of course.
Right.
How is that possible? But that's the thing, a demo, of course, by the 1980s,
Yeah.
people were able to do home demos that
Yeah.
sounded pretty much like the real thing, and it wasn't necessarily going to vary that
Right.
much.
Hmm.
But I think in the 70s and earlier, of course,
Yeah.
you were limited by what you could do in one
Hmm.
go. So it really just needed a guitar and a
Right.
vocalist.
A reference there. So yeah.
Just a
Mhm.
reference, yeah. It's
Yeah.
just purely to say, oh, this is it. I got through to the end of the song, and
Yeah.
this is how it goes, rather than having to sit there and give people a performance to put the thing across. I think Genesis found it very difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm quoting Tony again, him saying,
Mm.
it's very difficult when I play a new song to you guys because you
Yeah.
just sit there stony faced, um,
Right. Tough
whilst
crowd.
I'm killing myself to do this, and
Yeah.
Genesis could be like a bunch of Russian ice skating judges marking everyone down.
Right.
I think because of the competitive nature of the band as well, and
Yeah.
and also lack of imagination, because you don't always know what's going to be born out of someone coming up with the bare bones
Right.
of
Yeah.
something. So if it was tough for him, you can
Yeah.
imagine it was agony for
Right.
yours
It
truly.
was kind of rough all around, I'm sure. So
Yeah, not always easy
yeah.
performance. So yeah, the home demo was
Yeah.
very, very useful. Even
Yeah.
if it was just a cassette, you go through once. These are the chords. Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. That's the,
Yeah.
that's the top line, and
Hmm.
the rest is up for grabs.
Yeah. So my final question is it's a bit more of a not trivia question, but it's like so I know that there's the story that's been told in interviews before
Mm.
that Spectral Mornings started out as a vocal tune, that there were going to be vocals for it.
Yeah,
Did you actually write lyrics for it, or was it still like, oh, this is going to be vocal and I just never got around to writing lyrics for it?
I had an idea that
Okay.
it was going to be something like, because I felt that there was a quality of Pete Hicks's voice that sounded a little bit like Elton John at times,
Okay.
when Elton was singing ballads. And From an early tape that Pete sent me,
Hmm.
Pete Hicks, that is. But I hadn't. I maybe had a couple of lines. I was
Hmm.
thinking of Randy Newman, Louisiana. They're going to wash us away.
Okay.
String,
Hmm.
piano, um, a rising bass line throughout the chords,
Yeah.
a la Bach, a
Hmm.
la Jimmy Webb,
Hmm.
the great chordsmiths. But I played the lead line to the guys on guitar,
Yeah.
and they all said, "Oh, well, why don't you do it as an instrumental,
Right.
just like that?" So I was led to it. That wasn't my
Okay.
intention. My original
Right.
intention was so, and indeed, later on, there were people who there is a vocal version that exists
Right.
with the
I think
late
David
great
Lodge
David
in
Longdon.
London.
That's
Yeah.
right, and the guys from Magenta,
Yeah. Okay.
Rob Reed.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes,
I was just curious. I had never heard if you had said
and
that you actually had a set of lyrics ready to go or if it
Tina Booth.
was,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
no, I was just
So
curious about that.
I didn't have a set of lyrics ready to go, or I might
Yeah.
have insisted on a vocal version, but it
Right.
meant that the album became a tad more guitar-y
Yeah.
as a result of that.
Hmm.
And occasionally I would be criticized for relying too much on keyboard players, but I think that's erroneous because
Yeah.
unless you intend to be Britain's new answer to Hank Marvin,
Hmm.
um, or you're going to do a blues album. I've
Yeah.
never actually done an entirely instrumental
Right.
electric guitar album. I've done it with um, a nylon guitar for
Right.
various reasons because I think of that as the composer's
Yeah.
instrument. It's the guitarist equivalent to a piano.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, and it kind of
yeah,
goes back to what you were saying before about that you always kind of thought about it as a band, not just, oh, here's a avenue for my guitar playing type of thing. It was more about the
yeah,
song versus, and there's
yes,
certainly guitar material in there,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's not about, oh, this is just, somebody, playing, just doing guitar for the sake of guitar. Not
yeah,
that that's a
yeah,
bad thing in itself either, but it's not what it seemed like you were
yeah.
ever looking to do that. So,
I think that all the uncertainties, and I had plenty of uncertainties,
mhm.
led me into um, areas that I'm very pleased that I was
Yeah.
out of my depth in so many areas. I was out of my depth with
Right.
singing, with rhythm,
Yeah.
with many, many things. And each time something clicked,
Hmm.
um, uh, I, I was pleased
Right.
that it was this learning process.
Hmm.
So deficiencies I think were or a very good thing. Lack of
Yeah.
imagination, call it what you will. I was not, um, you know, Barry Gibb going, this is how the song goes, one, two, three.
Right.
And I know, and I've worked with people who have complete confidence and know exactly
Hmm.
where they're going, etc. Blah, 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 blah.
Hmm.
Very, very gifted people who think very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And I admire that. But I think uncertainty can produce, and it's something that John Aycock said, and it's to his credit. He said,
Hmm.
sometimes these things that you're least certain about very often end up being some of the strongest things.
Right.
And he meant Virgin and the Gypsy for
Okay.
one, because I didn't really know what shape the song was going to take.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had a
Yeah.
verse and a chorus,
Yeah.
um, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
That,
And then you
yeah,
discover in the studio, this is how it works. And,
that's how it works. What other
yeah.
people bring to it, the
Yeah.
possibilities that other people color it. They bring their passions, their expertise,
Mhm.
all of it. So yes, it is an album that I was
Yeah.
very proud of when I'd
Sure.
finished it. I thought
Great.
I'm onto a good one here. This is not
Yeah.
counterfeit. This is not counterfeit. This is the real thing.
Right.
And music is its own currency,
Yeah.
and this has something in it that has a unique energy and
Yeah. Well, there's that story about
it's not
like
generic.
bands take 3 albums to kind of figure out who they are. And
Yes. Well,
that's kind of this is your third album, and it's like
yeah.
you had a band going, and you were like,
Yes.
oh, this is a most I don't want to say it's the most coherent of the first 3 albums, but it certainly
Right.
is. It has a consistency to it
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think Voyage of the Acolyte has a consistency. I think Please Don't Touch is built to be very all over the place. It kind
Yes.
of, with different singers and everything. And then this is more
Exactly.
like, a consolidation of the past 2 albums and saying, here's what I'm all about. And
Yes.
it's putting it forward, and it's the diversity of music within that. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd agree with everything you're saying there. I think well observed.
sure. I've thought about this for a
Yeah.
while, so it's
Yeah.
there.
Well,
So,
that's the thing. I think we've all
yeah,
had time to think about
yeah,
things that have moved us, and
yeah.
I can say this, about some of the classical stuff that I've
Hmm.
loved, or indeed some of the other things. Why would I like a
Hmm.
particular thing that's in a genre that normally I might be in danger of dismissing the whole
Hmm.
genre and then finding that actually there's something in there. There's something that Sidney Bechet brought to Petite Fleur,
Hmm.
and Chris Barber's version with Monty Sunshine on clarinet
Hmm.
takes even further. It pares it down and makes it
Yeah.
uniquely personal and
Hmm.
sensual and ooh, elemental. I think that's the word.
Right.
Elemental. It's
Hmm.
you cannot describe it as anything other than um, completely inspired.
Great. So, well, thanks for talking with us,
Oh,
and also, what's you talked about recording new material before. So,
yep.
what's the plan for the rest of the year now? What's coming
Uh,
out in the world of Hackett in the next couple
well,
months to year?
uh, uh, um, uh, there's a new album which is nearing completion.
Hmm.
Um, there have been four different engineering brains
Hmm.
involved with it,
Right.
with whatever they bring to it, production ideas, playing,
Hmm.
um, etc. So it's the product of um, Ben Fenner,
Hmm.
uh, Roger King.
Okay.
Um, they've been involved in, one or two tracks perhaps,
Hmm.
whereas the rest are done by um, myself and Jonas Reigel
Hmm.
and Ricardo Romano. So
And he's the new keyboard player in the band, correct? Or am I?
no, actually, the
Oh,
new keyboard player in our band is Lale Larson.
got it. Okay.
Um, and Lale is once again another Flower King
Hmm.
man,
Sure.
and he also has um, works with the ABBA material in
Mm,
some
okay.
way.
Okay.
In some way, um, very gifted virtuoso,
Mm,
um, incredible improviser.
okay.
Um, Roger described him as an absolute monster when he knew that Lally was going to be taking over. So generous enough to
Right.
say he's an absolute monster player.
Yeah.
Um, so the bar gets raised
Right.
each time. And as I was leaving rehearsals, it was yesterday.
Mm,
Nad said to me, "What a band you've amassed!
right.
What an incredible band you have." That was it. And he was absolutely right. I couldn't.
Yeah.
There's also a new drummer who's
Right.
Felix Lerman, who's
Mm-hmm.
worked with us in Europe before, but and some shows um, when we were away in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an extraordinary band.
Yeah.
It seems to cover um, so many known and
Yeah.
unknown genres that it's uh, it's arresting
Right.
from the very first note. I
Great.
would say completely arresting, and
Yeah.
it's a kind of like an oral shock. The very first notes that you hear, and I've heard it several times.
Yeah. And is there a date for the album yet, or is it
I
kind of
can't say
still
for certain
nebulous now?
because I don't know. Finishing touches.
Hmm.
I have to play a little more myself.
Okay.
I think I have all the tunes.
Hmm.
We also have to make sure that all the mixes are absolutely up to par.
Right.
Um, I want to get the surround sound system into
Right.
the basement where I'm working here,
Hmm.
ground floor, I should say.
Sure.
Still got daylight, which is nice.
That's
Nice
always a
to
good thing. Sure.
nice to work with daylight. Yeah, the
Mm.
timeless void can serve the best interests of the
Hmm.
music, and that can take you anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're still on the bridge of the Enterprise, that feeling that, artificial space, if not intelligence, is out there
Yeah.
to be created.
Right.
But hey, I'm
Cool.
I'm having I'm having a ball doing this
That's
album. I'm very proud of it.
excellent.
It goes to a lot of surprising places.
Hmm.
It's got a powerful energy to it.
Right.
I think there's a difference in the rhythm section.
Okay.
Craig is
Yeah.
on it as well as
Okay.
Felix.
Right.
Felix.
Hmm.
It's a very interesting sounding
Yeah.
album if I heard it.
Mhm.
I would be asking, oh, who did that? What's going on? What's going on? How's that done? What's
Right,
going on
yeah.
there? You know, it's
Uh,
who
and
are
that's
they?
a
Who was
great
that
thing.
masked man?
If you've been living with it for this long and it
Yeah,
still surprises you that way, that's always a
it
good
does.
sign, I think.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. No,
Cool.
it's hugely surprising. I'm hugely proud of it.
Yeah.
I hope people will like it. But and I hope that this is the point where you think, well, as long as the plane lands,
Yes.
I can make sure this gets
Right.
released.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's well, imagine
Yeah.
what that might have been. Yeah.
Right. Cool.